Imagine you've just bought a new game in the year of our Lord 2023. It's a brand spanking new game with a $70 price tag, and as soon as you boot up the game, you're immediately hit with the devastating reality of modern gaming. You go on to an in-game store in a single-player game that you can use to buy currencies and cosmetics and all sorts of little trinkets with actual money. Before we get started though, be sure to subscribe and comment on the video if you enjoy content like this, because it helps us produce a whole lot more for you. Yeah, microtransactions. That's one of the bigger issues that plagues modern gaming today. With Capcom sneaking in microtransactions for the Resident Evil 4 remake weeks after its launch, to multiplayer titles such as Overwatch 2 and Call of Duty getting significantly revamped in order to encourage players to use real money, it's gotten pretty bad. But where did it really begin? How did microtransactions go from non-existent to suddenly at the forefront of game development? Believe it or not, microtransactions have pretty much always been a part of gaming in one way or another. In fact, one might argue that back then it was even worse than what we have today. Let's not forget the way many arcade games at the time were designed. Before the advent of home consoles, this was one of the most accessible ways to actually play a video game at all. As such, these games were intentionally designed to be challenging and even borderline unfair in order to hog all of your pocket change. And then, home consoles and PC gaming got into the mix. Now, you could actually buy your games as a whole and play them forever without having to rely on the cruel grip of the arcade machines. During this time, many games would receive additional content in the form of optional level packs. The original Doom after its launch got a bunch of new levels in the form of an entirely new episode called Thigh Flesh Consumed. This episode came bundled with the Ultimate Doom in 1995, 2 years after the launch of the original game. That's mostly how it used to work back in the day. Games would frequently get special or exclusive editions that would include bonus levels, and eventually, this evolved into what we know as expansion packs. Developers such as Blizzard, Valve, and Bethesda were among the many that would frequently release massive expansion packs. In 2005, it was Microsoft which initially pushed the idea for microtransactions. This was touted as a separate revenue stream for developers and publishers alike. The company offered a winter-themed outfit for Cameo, Elements of Power for $2.50, alongside new maps for Perfect Dark Zero and new cars for Project Gotham Racing 3. None of these early microtransactions took off in a major way, but it was all about Microsoft showing a proof of concept to other publishers. The first proper mainstream introduction for microtransactions was through Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion. In April 2006, Bethesda, in their infinite hubris, thought that it would be a good idea to sell players what was basically a cosmetic upgrade for your horse in the form of the Horse Armor DLC. For $2.50 or $2 if you were on PC, you could get a shiny new look for your in-game pony. Of course, at the time, this decision was ruthlessly mocked by players, especially for its insane price tag for what was basically a generic cosmetic. If only they knew. If only we knew back then what the prices of Counter-Strike skins would be in 2023. While the idea of a side revenue stream is understandable, especially for free-to-play games, too much unchecked power in the hands of publishers could never lead to something good. And it didn't, because in the late 2010s, we saw a huge rise in games that were built and designed to squeeze as much money as possible out of the consumer through insidious monetization. At the forefront of this was, you guessed it, Electronic Arts, being by far the most aggressive of the bunch with how they approach monetization. While FIFA is still the eternally milk cash cow it has always been, EA made microtransactions a strong part of their other games as well, especially the ruthlessly maligned Star Wars Battlefront 2. It was a shame too, because Star Wars Battlefront 2 was a highly competent game, just utterly destroyed by a malicious loot box system meant to leech money off of its player base. Unfortunately, the state of microtransactions would only get worse with time. In 2016, Overwatch was released, a Team Fortress 2 inspired hero shooter by Blizzard. This was the next big thing everyone was talking about. Celebrities were talking about it, pro players were talking about it, hell, even Elon Musk was talking about it. Though, I don't know how much confidence that last sentence instills nowadays. Despite all of this, the game generated a ton of controversy on release for its use of loot boxes and the option to purchase them using real money, Worrying considering the base game cost $40 all by itself. Fast forward to October 2022 and Overwatch 2 just released and it's free to play, except the loot boxes have been removed, which should be good, right? No. It is so much worse. Overwatch 2 features a battle pass system similar to many other free-to-play games, and you can just purchase the pass and get access to all the cosmetics through playing as you normally would. The major caveat, you can no longer earn or get certain skins unless you pay real money for it, as a large majority of the game's new legendary skins are gated behind an insane price tag. One of the most fun parts that we remember about Overwatch 1 was logging in every day to grind levels and get loot boxes, because with that you could actually get what you wanted entirely for free. Now, it's actually nearly impossible to get that fancy new skin you want without shelling out at least $10. To add further insult to injury, Blizzard has effectively wiped Overwatch 1 off the map, ensuring that it's practically impossible to go back to it again, and I don't think I need to tell you how bad that is. This is also unfortunately something that isn't exclusive to multiplayer games either. Back in 2017, Middle-earth: Shadow of War received such an overwhelming backlash to the game's grueling microtransactions that the developers had to patch them entirely out of the game. Not only that, but the game had to be rebalanced just to make sure that the grinding was less painful without microtransactions. What made it worse was that the game's secret ending had been locked behind an excruciating paywall for players who didn't want to grind the game for dozens of hours. Unfortunately, yet another victim of this was Visceral Games, and as a result, Dead Space 3. Dead Space 3's development has been very well documented at this point as an ambitious project utterly destroyed by corporate demands that were more focused on chasing trends rather than creating an actually good video game. This was also one of the first major offenders of the microtransaction curse, letting players craft better and higher quality weapons by spending just a little bit of money to speed things up. The game was a malformed abomination of clashing ideas that meshed together about as cohesively as the monsters you fought. And what was the result of this? Visceral were then forced to make a game they had no experience in, and when that failed, EA shut down the studio to cover up for their own mistakes. At this point, we were clearly reaching an era where even single-player games were being directly designed around scummy monetization practices. Shadow of War and Dead Space 3 are just some examples, but there are so many more that if I talked about all of them, this video would be an hour long at the very least. But let's do a rapid fire of games that all have awful monetization anyway, because why not? Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Assassin's Creed Origins, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, Forza Motorsport 7, Gran Turismo 7, Marvel's The Avengers, Destiny 2, every modern Call of Duty game you've ever played, Grand Theft Auto 5, Genshin Impact, Diablo Immortal, and I could go on and on and on. The sad truth is that microtransactions aren't going anywhere. Despite the backlash from a large chunk of the gaming community, the truth is that millions of people still pay for them. Despite being last year's punching bag in the gaming community, Diablo Immortal still pulled over $300 million in the span of a few months solely through its microtransactions. Overwatch 2 continues to be as successful as ever, earning over $100 million in its first 3 months alone. The fact remains that as long as consumers pay for them, microtransactions aren't going anywhere. Publishers want money, and they will always go for the most profitable option. For them, it's little more than a business. But not all is doom and gloom. There are still publishers respecting the wishes of a large chunk of gamers who don't like this sort of system. Many single-player titles avoid it altogether, and even multiplayer titles are coming up with relatively consumer-friendly monetization systems. Games like the Dead Space remake, God of War Ragnarok, the Callisto Protocol, and even the newly released Star Wars Jedi Survivor are all games that don't have any microtransactions at all. And in a time where thousands of games are vying for your attention all at once, it's kinda easy to skip a game if you'd rather not support microtransactions anyway.